West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Italy is on course to elect the country's first government led by the far right since the end of World War II. According to early projections, a coalition led by Giorgia Meloni has won a decisive victory in Italy's snap election. That coalition won just over 43% of the vote, which is enough to give it a comfortable parliamentary majority. Joining us now, Professor of History at New York University, Ruth Ben-Ghiat. She's the author of the book Strongmen, Mussolini to the Present. Good to have you.
So, Ruth, it seems to me that far right may be a bit too tame of a description for a party that has fascist roots. And it looks like the next leader of Italy, who once openly praised Benito Mussolini.
Oh, absolutely. And it's important to stress that because she's now trying to market herself as a conservative. But there is nothing conservative about Meloni or her party. Her party was formed in 2012 because the Berlusconi government before had fused with the existing far-right party, and there was no autonomous right-wing extremist party. So that's where that was the origins of that. Meloni herself was a hardcore neo-fascist militant her whole life since 15 years old, rising to become the head in the 90s of the youth organization. And it's very important, if you look at the logo of the party, there's a tricolor flame in there. And that was the original logo of the neo-fascist party that was founded after Mussolini, died and his party was banned. And she has insisted to keep that flame in there because her mission is to bring forth, to carry forth the values of fascism. So much so that a party elder just 3 days ago said, we are all heirs of Il Duce. So so you're going to hear a lot of whitewashing, a lot of talk about her being conservative, but it's important to know who she is.
Not the case. You write about this development in a piece for The Atlantic entitled The Return of Fascism in Italy. Reading from your piece, quote, if Meloni comes to power at the end of the month, it will be as head of a coalition whose other member were each once the main force on Italy's populist right. Meloni's enemies list is familiar. LGBT lobbies that are out to harm women and the family by destroying gender identity. George Soros, an international speculator, she has said, who finances global mass immigration that threatens a great replacement of white, native-born Italians. Meloni shows affinity for authoritarian strongmen like Marine Le Pen, until recently the leader of the National Rally Party in France. Meloni has expressed support for Russian President Vladimir Putin, although she has muted that enthusiasm since his invasion of Ukraine. The current popularity of Meloni's party, in part, indicates the weakness of the Italian center-left, which has struggled to package its ideas in ways that connect with voters. Above all, it signifies an acceleration of Italy's democratic backsliding.
So, Professor, and I've been saying this since 2015, one of the biggest problems in European politics that I was concerned about was the fact if you ever talked about meaningful immigration regulation, meaningful immigration reform across Europe, you were called a Nazi. You were called a fascist. You were never allowed to discuss, like, for instance, what Merkel did in Germany, what happened in Sweden with 40,000 Syrian refugees. And of course, there's always the pushback saying, oh, well, things have been great since then for Germany. Things have been great in Sweden since then. The voters don't think so. And again, there's not been, you're talking about the failing of center left. I think there's been a failure in the center of European politics where there's no reasonable, rational way to talk about immigration without being called a Nazi. So we end up with Nazis or fascists getting elected.
Yes, and one of the problems is that, Berlusconi, who was in and out over the 2000s, and by the way, is one of her partners in the governing coalition, is a convicted criminal. And he was one of the first to detain migrants and demonize migrants in all of his governments. And Salvini of the League, who's the other governing partner, he actually called for, quote, mass cleansings of immigrants. And so this is part of the problem, that when you have such extremes and people actively promoting racist and violence against immigrants, and Berlusconi, who loved to make deals with other despots, so he made a deal with Gaddafi to send all the boats back. That skews the whole debate. And when you've got these extremists, it seems it's very difficult to have a kind of centrist option prevail.
It is Tuesday, the 27th of September of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika, or even Spanish paprika, will make all the difference in the world. And if you read up on the spice trade, you'll find out it's so very true. All right, well, we smashed they call it a refrigerator sized, I like to say vending machine sized satellite at speed into a moving object millions of miles away to see if we could knock the bigger object, which is the size of a football field stadium. A football field stadium, which can be pretty big. We're not talking a high school stadium. We're talking, Big Ten, SEC size stadium. I would have said Rose Bowl. A Rose Bowl size stadium, because that holds, a couple 100,000. Or maybe even the Coliseum, the LA Coliseum. That's another couple 100,000 in its heyday. So, smacked a Coke machine into a football stadium, and to see if it could get knocked off course. Now, listen. Objects moving in space react differently when smacked than they would, like when I was in a semi hitchhiking across America, and we went through what I called a locust storm. Didn't slow the truck down, didn't really divert our route. Just barreled right on through. And it remained to be seen who was smacking what, Were those locusts smacking us, or were we smacking those locusts? And I think the bigger object kind of felt, I'm moving. I'm moving as fast as you are, probably. And we'll see how it goes. So, but, you're pinned to rubber on, concrete, asphalt, maybe, out there on the I-80 going across America at about, back in the day, 65 miles per hour was 5 miles over the speed limit. I had some people say, oh, you'd be holding up traffic. Yeah, I know, but they were holding up traffic back then, too, and everybody had to drive 55. There's no 65 miles per hour. That's why they ran Carter out. Because he was trying to tell people to slow down. That little bit of slowing down, we're going to conserve some gas. And the truckers all said, no, I'm going to lose money if I try to conserve gas. Or diesel. And anyway, so we don't want to go off too far from a tangent because we got to rein in our satellites and just make this point. Let us hope that in our quest to perform an experiment in which we can determine whether we have the ability to even slightly nudge a dangerous object headed our way, if we're able to move that off in time, that it would pass us and then we'll, be free from its, life-changing results. This is how it would go. Let's hope mammals survive again. Let's hope. So if we can do that's a great endeavor to attempt to do. But I hate the idea of going after one of these so-called harmless objects and nudge it ever so slightly our way. Thanks. I know that's not their plan, but do it on a pool table. Once again, I know the friction of felt is different than, the infinity of a vacuum. There is no infinity in a vacuum, but I always liked the idea, didn't you? Man, we're finding out that space isn't as much of a vacuum as we make it up to be. Okay, enough of that. Speaking of vacuums that need to be filled, see what happens what the fascists do. My God, this Giorgia Meloni, oh God. I kept hearing from all my hippie friends, oh, don't worry, it's attrition, man. All the old fogies are dying off. Yeah, all the old fogies are dying off. They remembered how bad it was. Keep reminding us, don't let it happen again, and it's happening again. Because all the old fogies have all died off. How many people remember? Yeah. The 100-mile march. Oh, God. Goose stepping. And you know what? This is another thing. She came out yesterday and accused, George Soros type liberals, all of us, right? Pretty much, hook-nosed money changers. Yeah, no subtlety there, okay? That's pretty much what she was saying in Italian. Hook-nosed money changers. Right during Rosh Hashanah, too. I wonder if that was a plan. Anyway, she said that they were changing her and the rest of Italy into, this is what she called, consumer slaves. Well, join the 21st century, lady. Consumer slaves. And she's wearing Armani and, jingling some Bulgari baubles. My God. Consumer slave. It wasn't George Soros and the money changers, lady. I gotta tell you, a lot of Protestants there in Madison Avenue back in the day knew exactly what they wanted and how they were gonna get it. All right. Well, she wants to make sure that the purity of the white race remains in Italy. And there's a lot of races in America right now going. They're white people or Italians. Italians. You can always tell a racist if they come up to you and say, I was down at the creek trying to play the piano. Really? If you call it a piano, I'm going to call you Bubba. In a bad way. Yeah, because Bubba can be endearing. I mean, come on. It doesn't have to be like race specific, I guess, to, some slovenly guy that uses a commode for a barbecue too. I've seen pictures of it. I would never get near one of those things because I know what happens when you heat up porcelain. Don't ask me how. We were Boy Scouts back in the day and we had to make experiments, didn't we? Yes, we did. That's what I'm saying. Smack a Coke machine into a football stadium and hopefully nothing bad happens. What if you get a gas main? Jeez. No one ever thinks about these things. Yes, they do. But anyway, this is the first, getting back to that story, this is the first great step in attempting to save mankind so that we can keep on punching these fascist Nazis, and they seem to be on the rise again. Maybe we need to take it upon ourselves to be the bridge from all those old fogies who are dying off or who have died off, and we can't, and we have to tell their story because they can't. They told it. Now look, we can't read about Anne Frank. That might make little Dieter not be able to stiff arm salute and goose step the way we want him to. That's really what it is. I don't want my kid to care about other people. That's not the fascisti way. Okay. White dominance. It's not white supremacy anymore. It's white dominance. Like it's always been, actually. It's not be skirting around the point. It's never been about supremacy. It's been about dominance. I dom, you sub. Oh, yes, and we feel, and all of us subs are supposed to feel like, oh, good, I feel so happy. Take away all my autonomy, my identity. And the dom is going, exactly. Now you know what to do. Now you've made the choice. See, you had a choice. And then the sub goes, you're right, I did choose. I guess I got to live by my choices. But you know what? You never get just one choice. That's what they keep not wanting you to know. And that's why they burn books. Movies and everything else, You'll always notice that the artists are the ones that go and get their hands smashed, so and then paraded out and made to try to play their famous song before they go back and beat the crap out of him and then put a bullet in his head. Or maybe a bunch of submachine guns riddling his body. That's happened. Yeah. Okay. All right, well, we could go on about all that, but we want to have a happy show, don't we? Do we? Can we? I don't know. This salon has to be elevated into some sort of happiness by the virtual tidbits of actual morsels of food that may be manufactured. Yeah, we do that. Here at this salon we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Yes, we might as well get right into it, starting off at the top. Party elders have called newly elected Italian fascist Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni the great heir to Il Duce. And we know what happened to him. Yeah, his world was literally turned upside down. On the rest of the menu, Arizona abortion clinics are sending women to other states after prosecutors were given the go-ahead to enforce the Civil War era near total ban on the procedure. And they can't wait. The EPA is preparing a plan to help fix the Jackson, Mississippi water system. See, that's good news. And the United States antitrust lawsuit against American Airlines and JetBlue begins today. Whether that's good or bad, we'll find out. It just begins today. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the head of the Francis Greens party stepped down from his post after his former partner accused him of psychological abuse. And I got to tell you, when in France, if it's psychological abuse, we're talking about something a little bit more kinky than some shades of gray. And another suspect is detained in Poland in the slaying of Dutch crime reporter Peter R de Vries. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page, is the chat room link. The chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page from that chat room link to the left, you'll notice our Patreon link. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could possibly send us what you might spend on, I don't know, how about an espresso-type coffee drink? How about that? If you could send those funds our way once a month, we're able to consolidate other dollars sent to us in that way and pay our bills, fly under the radar. And boy, do we ever need to, because the this powerhouse of resistance might have to do some real resisting, since the rise of fascism, it always marches on, even more so now. But thank you to those of you who have been so generous over these 11 plus years. And since it's getting towards the end of the year, then it's, a countdown to our 12th. A dozen years doing what we do. And what is it that we do? Well, we are that powerhouse of resistance here at Netroots Radio to make sure those dark forces arrayed against democracy here in the United States and around the world have some bulwark from their steady march, goose-stepping over, everything that is, good and pure. I don't know how pure, but it's certainly good, isn't it? Individual autonomy, freedom to make your own choice, but only if you're aware enough to make it. Otherwise, you become a consumer slave, right? Giorgia? All right. Well, I just love that. They're going to make us into consumer slaves? You're wearing Armani, biatch. I'm sorry. I got to get back to what we're doing. Okay. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. And Tom takes care of that. And we are so thankful he does. Thanks, Tom. You can follow me on Twitter, and I suggest you do, at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime, and that's where the real reportage is. So you can find the real reportage, sans everything else that we do here, at the my Twitter feed. Yeah, everything's linked up right there. You can also follow the show, if you choose to do that, at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, really wherever podcasts can be found. Oh, I failed to mention at the top, I got suspended from Nextdoor. Don't ask me why. I would be going to Nextdoor, but I was suspended for 4 days because apparently they had enough of me. And I had enough of them for a considerable time. And I don't know, I got sucked back in. I thought, I'm going to play with these lizard brains. And that's really what they have. A bunch of lizard brains. Talk about NIMBY BS. Yeah, well, a lot of whining. A whole lot of whining. And if you just call them whiners, well, with a few other choice terms like maggot Q-loon, I guess that's supposed to be not respectful to other people, because you're calling them names. They're the ones that label themselves that. I'm just repeating their names, but that's how they get you. If you call them back what they call themselves, you will be suspended. So, all right, well, they called me a pedo baby blood drinker, and all I did was call them a bunch of Nazis. All right. Okay, George Soros is all the problem in the world, but once you bring it up that that's an anti-Semitic trope, you're out. Because Nextdoor's not for that. But they always suck you in. And then they, spit you out. Thank you. I could care less about Nextdoor. Anyway, let us now tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays comes out of the Associated Press by Jonathan J. Cooper and Terry Tang. When an Arizona judge ruled last week that prosecutors can resume enforcing a near-total ban on an abortion that dates to the Civil War, it fell to the staff at Camelback Family Planning to break the news to the women scheduled for appointments in the coming weeks. The staff faced crying, a lot of very, very angry people, denial, Nurse Ashley Faring said on Monday. One woman argued, but I'm only 5 weeks along. Women seeking abortions across Arizona were forced to find alternatives beyond the state's borders after the ruling, which clears the way for prosecutors who charge doctors and others who help a woman end a pregnancy unless her life is in danger. And, of course, we all know what that means. You have to make sure her life is actually in danger. She's going into septic shock. Even better if she's already there. Providers in neighboring states already seeing an increase in traffic from other conservative states that have banned abortion were preparing to treat some of the 13,000 Arizona patients who get an abortion each year. Planned Parenthood of Arizona asked Pima County Superior Court Judge Kelly Johnson to put her ruling on hold pending an appeal, saying it created confusion about the status of the law. Lawyers cited conflicts created by the abortion ban dating to 1864, a more recent law banning abortions after 15 weeks, and a variety of other laws regulating the processes and paperwork when terminating pregnancies. Johnson's ruling lifted an injunction that was imposed after the U.S. Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade decision guaranteed a right to abortion in 1973. After the Camelback Family Planning Clinic in Central Phoenix, a young woman at the clinic, a young woman took off from work Monday afternoon for an appointment to get medicine to help with an abortion. The 20-year-old is afraid she is prone to miscarriage and already miscarried 2 years ago. I do not want to experience this. I don't have the time and energy to go through that again, said the woman, who declined to give her name, but she never made it past the check-in window. Instead, she got a slip of paper with a website to order medicine by mail and left visibly upset. The fascists do it always in the most cruel way. Michael Goldberg of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. The federal government wants to work with officials in Mississippi's capital city to reach a legal agreement that ensures Jackson can sustain its water system in the future. Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Michael Regan said on Monday. Federal attorneys also sent a letter to city officials yesterday threatening legal action against the city if it does not agree to negotiations related to its water system. Regan returned to Mississippi's capital city on Monday to meet with Jackson officials about the city's troubled water system. At the meeting with Jackson Mayor Chakwa Antoine Lumumba and U.S. Assistant Attorney General Todd Kim, Regan said the federal government would work with the city to deliver long overdue relief for Jackson residents. The people of Jackson, Mississippi have lacked access to safe and reliable water for decades. After years of neglect, Jackson's water system finally reached a breaking point this summer, leaving tens of thousands of people without any water running for weeks, Regan said. These conditions are unacceptable in the United States of America. In a Monday letter sent to city officials and obtained by the news station WLBT-TV, Kim and attorneys for the DOJ's Environmental Enforcement Section said they were prepared to file an action against the city under the Safe Drinking Water Act, but hoped the matter could be resolved through an enforceable agreement. The letter said that state and local officials had not acted to protect public health. Koenig of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The government's antitrust lawsuit against American Airlines and JetBlue begins today, and the outcome could determine how closely the Biden administration examines other airline deals, including JetBlue's pending attempt to buy Spirit Airlines. The Justice Department and 6 states are suing American and JetBlue to break up their partnership in the Northeast, namely New York and Boston. It is a significant test of the administration's opposition to mergers, even though the American JetBlue partnership is not a full merger. The government argues that the alliance will reduce competition and lead to higher fares. It's already led to, you don't even get peanuts for free on there anymore. The Trump administration approved the alliance, but the Justice Department began taking a closer look after President Joe Biden took office. American and JetBlue will argue that the partnership was already in effect for 18 months and has allowed each airline to offer new routes that would not be economical for either on its own. They say there is no evidence that the deal is hurting consumers. The current and former CEOs of American and JetBlue CEO, along with senior officials from other airlines, are among potential witnesses identified by the two sides. Delta Airlines tried to prevent 2 executives from testifying, saying they are too busy in Atlanta, where the airline is based, to attend the federal trial in Boston. The judge ruled that one of them, a senior vice president, must be available to testify forthwith. U.S. District Judge Leo Sorokin has set aside nearly 3 weeks for the trial. There will be no jury. Sorokin could take weeks or even months to issue a decision, which is likely to be appealed by the losing side. When the Justice Department filed the lawsuit a year ago, Attorney General Merrick Garland called the American JetBlue alliance an unprecedented maneuver that would lead to higher fares, fewer choices, and poor service for travelers. The Justice Department's top antitrust official, Assistant Attorney General Jonathan Cantor, echoed those arguments during a hearing last week before a Senate subcommittee. He said that while new airlines have entered the business over the years, leading to lower fares and better service, too many of them have been swallowed up by mergers and acquisitions. We remain committed to fighting airline concentration when it breaks the law, Cantor told the senators. We are looking very carefully at our approach to airline consolidation. We have numerous other matters under review. Cantor did not say what those other matters are, but one likely could be JetBlue's proposal to buy Spirit for $3.8 billion. Spirit CEO Ted Christie, who preferred a merger with Frontier, fought JetBlue for months by arguing that antitrust regulators would never allow his low-fare airline to be swallowed up by JetBlue, a more conventional and higher-priced carrier. Under the alliance, American and JetBlue sell seats on each other's flights and share their revenue. They say they coordinate on schedules but not prices, and they give consumers reciprocal benefits in the frequent flyer programs. Sounds like a merger. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Hi, and welcome to COVID Quickly, a Scientific American podcast series.
This is your fast-track update on the COVID pandemic. We bring you up to speed on the science behind most urgent questions about the virus and the disease. We demystify the research and help you understand what it really means.
I'm Tanya Lewis.
I'm Josh Fishman.
And we're Scientific American's senior health editors. Today, we're going to take a personal look at a moderate case of COVID, if Josh's voice holds up.
And we'll talk about how we decide when pandemics are really over, not just when presidents say they are. Can you hear me okay? Do I sound too rough?
Actually, you sound fairly normal.
Good. That's a change for the better. Yesterday, I sounded like I was at the bottom of a well, but without that cool echoey effect and with a lot more gurgling.
Because?
Because I have COVID. I started showing symptoms about 2 weeks ago, and I still have them.
Oh man, that sucks. I'm so sorry.
Thanks. I don't want to make this episode all about me, though.
I don't either, but we do talk a lot about scientific studies, and we don't often talk about what it's like to actually have COVID.
I didn't believe I caught it at first. I've spent 2.5 years avoiding it. I'm vaccinated and I'm boosted, and so to see that positive line on a rapid antigen test made me go, wait, what? That can't be right. So I took another test, and there was that line again.
Do you know how you got infected?
I'm pretty sure it was on a business trip to New York City. That meant trains and subways and sitting in a big meeting with about 200 other people, most of whom didn't wear masks. I wore a mask. But I did go to an outside bar with some friends from work, and there was a nice breeze, and, well, you can't drink beer through a mask. So I took mine off.
That's understandable. When did you know there was a problem?
3 days later, I was in my backyard, a nice warm day, and I started to get chills. And I knew I'd been in riskier situations than normal, so I took a test and did the whole double take thing.
Was it scary?
I wasn't scared for me. My lungs are in pretty good shape. I have good medical care and all that good stuff. But I worried about infecting my spouse. We grabbed masks right away, and I moved into a different part of the house. Not everyone has the luxury of that kind of space, though. So I was thinking we were actually lucky. By the next evening, I couldn't get out of bed, and I wasn't feeling quite so lucky.
Oh, geez. What were the worst symptoms?
I don't want to get into really icky details.
Okay, well, give us the non-icky version.
Coughing, pretty much nonstop. And my throat got so painful from it that I couldn't even swallow tea with honey, which is usually soothing. There were 2 days where I just lay in bed and ate a little applesauce and gargled with salt water. And I swallowed a lot of NyQuil.
I'm sorry. Did you try Paxlovid?
I did. I got it right away, and I think it really helped. The cough got better after about 2 days, and I felt more energetic. And 6 days after the symptoms started, I was in my yard again, and I walked my dog, wearing a mask because I was still positive on the rapid tests. But then I had a relapse.
Really? One of those Paxlovid rebounds that we've heard about?
No, because I never cleared the virus. I have a whole souvenir row of positive test strips lined up on my dresser. And I still had some symptoms like chills and fatigue. The tests are pretty accurate. I looked them up on the Cochrane Reviews, the website of a really good nonprofit that evaluates medical evidence with very strict standards. And only about 11% of people taking antigen tests would get a false positive in my situation.
Huh. So how are things today?
I feel better, really better, and this is day 11. And this has just been a moderate disease. I've had the flu, but no flu has ever hit me this hard. So I'm back to feeling lucky. We're still losing 400 to 500 Americans every day to COVID. But I think I can get back to work, at least from home, and I don't think I've infected anyone around me. And if I stop testing positive, I can get out of the house.
Well, that's really good to hear you're feeling better. Just don't eat any of that NyQuil chicken.
President Biden caused a stir last week when he casually declared on 60 Minutes that the pandemic is over. Is it really over?
Not as far as I can tell, Josh. But it turns out that the point at which a pandemic is really over is hard to define. I wrote about this back in March when I interviewed John M. Barry, author of A Comprehensive History of the 1918 Influenza Pandemic. Barry told me then that the decision about when a pandemic ends is as much a human one as a scientific one.
That's interesting. But there are some scientific criteria, right?
Well, sort of. As Georgetown International Health Law professor Alexandra Phelan pointed out on Twitter, there's no formal law or process for declaring a pandemic over. For influenza pandemics, they're usually considered to be in a post-pandemic phase when flu cases return to seasonal levels. But it's not yet clear what those will be for COVID, or if we've even gotten there yet.
Right. 400 people a day are still dying of COVID in the US, and many more of them are dying around the world. That doesn't seem at all like the end of a pandemic to me.
Nor me. COVID is still spreading widely around the world and is likely to be around for the rest of our lives as an endemic virus. But thanks to vaccines and better treatments like Paxlovid, it's not killing nearly as many people. That said, we could still see a new variant this fall or winter that's better at evading the vaccines or is more severe. That could cause cases and hospitalizations to tick up again.
Which means that now is a good time to get an updated Omicron booster shot if you haven't already.
Exactly.
But getting back to Biden, some people strongly criticize him for saying the pandemic is over. Others say he was just acknowledging that most people are already living their lives with the virus around.
It may be true that many people have moved on. Others are still being cautious or struggling with lingering symptoms that have upended their lives. But whether or not you consider the pandemic over, the more important question is how we're going to deal with COVID going forward, especially for the most vulnerable among us. But there is reason for hope. Fewer people are dying from COVID globally now than at any time since March of 2020. As the WHO Director General said in a recent press briefing, we are not there yet, but the end is in sight. Now you're up to speed. Thanks for joining us. Our show is edited by Jeff Del Vicio and Tulika Bose.
Come back in 2 weeks for the next episode of COVID Quickly. And check out SciAm.com for updated and in-depth COVID news.
I was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean when it happened. There was a sudden jolt and our submarine crashed on the seafloor. We were in total darkness.
That's Dr. Dejana Figueroa, a marine biologist and STEM teacher, talking about a deep sea dive she'll never forget.
It's funny, when I was a kid, I was afraid of the ocean. And there I was, 2 miles below the surface. But as a scientist, you prepare for that. Using our training and a little creativity, we fixed the sub and finished our experiments. The dive was just too important. Every dive gives us glimpses at things few people ever get to see. Glowing creatures, fiery undersea volcanoes. When we got back to the surface, I kissed the ground and called my mom, of course. But you know what? I wouldn't trade that dive for anything.
Dr. Figueroa uses her passion for STEM to discover new things and make the world a better place. She can STEM, so can you. Check out She Can STEM for more stories and inspiration. A message from the Ad Council.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
It's been a record year of runaway wealth for America's billionaires, with this tiny clique vastly widening the chasm, separating them from us hoi polloi. For example, Amazon hefe Jeff Bezos hauled in $190 billion for the year. That pays him more than $360,000 a minute for every single minute of the year. So much taken by so few, who do so little while harming so many. Bezos erected his corporate empire on the backs of non-union workers he routinely exploits, plus millions of taxpayers he bilks. Indeed, his recent surge of wealth comes not from innovation or hard work, but from the windfall of bloated Wall Street stock prices, making him richer without lifting a finger. Yet, media and politicians hail Jeff as a big-thinking genius. Seriously? This self-centered ego's top achievement this year was to have the world's largest super yacht built for him, a 400-foot-long seagoing palace. But, oops, Jeff's pleasure craft can't get to the ocean because it's too tall to go under a bridge just downriver from the Dutch city where he's having it built. No problem for a billionaire genius, though. Boss Bezos simply instructed local officials to dismantle their historic bridge so his toy could pass through. But no go, for outraged locals learned of his imperious scheme and quickly organized a massive rotten egg brigade, pledging to pelt the colossal yacht and possibly Jeff. Very bad political optics. So the American mogul's billions were not allowed to buy his way out. This is Jim Hightower saying, it's still unclear how he'll get it out to sea, but one Dutch wag helpfully pointed out to him, you can still take your giant boat out for short trips down to the bridge and back. If these mega-rich privileged ones are so smart, why are they so stupid?
Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. Vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1909. That was the day the International Lady Garment Workers Union began a strike against the Triangle Shirtwaist Company. Eventually, female workers struck at 339 of the 352 shirtwaist manufacturing firms in New York City. The strike was referred to as the Uprising of 20,000. Women comprised 70% of all garment workers. Men performed the higher paid work of cutting and pressing, while women earned less for assembling and finishing garments. Women often had to furnish their own supplies, including needles, thread, and even sewing machines. Some firms locked the doors to each floor. The workers, mostly young girls and women, had to ask permission to go to the bathroom. While the strike initially started at the Triangle Shirtwaist Company, it soon spread to other factories. At a meeting of garment workers in November, a young girl, Clara Lemlich, called for a general strike. One day later, 15,000 shirtwaist workers walked out of the factories, with more joining the strike the following day. The strike continued until February 1910 and ended with factory owners agreeing to meet the demands of the workers, which included better pay and shorter hours. This strike was a notable achievement for these mostly immigrant working women. Nevertheless, garment workers after the 1909 strike continued to suffer harsh working conditions. A year later, many workers died in the tragic Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire. The fact that the company locked the doors on each floor meant that the workers had no means of escaping the blaze. Today, it's very difficult to find clothing that is union-made. We must work together to restore labor unions to protect the safety of those who make our clothing, both in the United States and throughout the world. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 55 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the mid-80s. A tad cooler than what we had yesterday. It looks like we will be having a cooling trend for the next couple of days at least. A mix of clouds and sun today. Winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Partly cloudy early this evening with increasing clouds overnight. Lows in the mid to upper 50s. Winds out of the west at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Then partly to mostly cloudy tomorrow. Highs in the mid-70s. And the winds will have increased out of the west at 10 to 15 miles per hour. Ragweed pollen is the predominant pollen here in Rogue River itself, rated moderate. The air quality index for the Rogue River Valley region is good at 30 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is moderate at level 5. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 29.99 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 90%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 57 degrees with rain. Paris is also 57 degrees with rain. Rome is 70 degrees and mostly cloudy and becoming predominantly fascist by the minute. Kyiv is 56 and cloudy. Kabul is 64 and clear. Hong Kong is 83 and fair. Tokyo is 71 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 62 degrees and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 56 and cloudy with a small craft wind advisory on the bay and offshore. And New York, New York is a pleasant, so they say, 66 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Associated Press staff bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. The head of Francis Green's party stepped down from his post yesterday, Monday, after his former partner reportedly accused him of psychological abuse amid mounting pressure within his party and broader efforts to hold French politicians accountable for misconduct toward women. Julien Bayou said in a statement that he was resigning from his post as National Secretary of the Europe Ecology, the Greens Party, a growing force in French politics in recent years. He said he would not quit his parliamentary seat, but would step down from his post as co-president of the Ecology Group in the National Assembly. Bayou had been suspended from the parliamentary leadership post since last week, while his party weighed what actions to take about a complaint filed against him with the party's anti-harassment unit. Fellow party figure Sandrine Rousseau said the complaint was filed by his ex-partner and that she accused him of psychological abuse. An internal investigation by the party is underway, but no criminal complaints have yet been filed. French politicians across the spectrum have faced accusations of misconduct toward women. Last week, France's parliamentary speaker released the first public accounting of complaints to a special unit aimed at fighting sexual and other harassment at the National Assembly.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Even more Associated Press staff bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Dutch prosecutors said yesterday, Monday, that a 30-year-old man suspected of involvement in the slaying of crime reporter Peter R de Vries has been arrested by authorities in Poland. De Vries, one of the Netherlands' best-known journalists who also campaigned to solve cold cases, was gunned down in Amsterdam on July 6th of last year. He died 9 days later of his injuries at the age of 64. Prosecutors said the Polish man was arrested on suspicion of helping prepare the attack and that he is believed to have lived in the Dutch port city of Rotterdam at the time of the shooting. His identity was not released in line with privacy regulations. Dutch authorities have requested his transfer to the Netherlands. 2 men were arrested near The Hague soon after De Vries was shot and are on trial for his murder. Prosecutors have sought life sentences for both. One of them is a Polish national, Kamil E., who is the alleged getaway driver. Another Polish national was arrested in July on suspicion of instructing the 2 men who carried out the hit. 2 other suspects were arrested in Spain and Curacao on the same day. Before his shooting, de Vries acted as an advisor and confidant for a witness in the trial of the alleged leader and other members of a crime gang that police described as an oiled killing machine. The witness's brother and his lawyer both were murdered. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte coeur. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.